the Grey Hat Beard podcast. Hello and welcome to show 23 of Grey Hat Beard, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. My name's Kevin McDonnell. I'm the Grey of Grey Hat Beard. I'm a solutions architect at CPS.
My name's Alan Erdley. I am the Hat of Grey Hat Beard. I am a solution architect at CPS and an Office and Apps MVP.
Hi everyone, my name is Gary Trinder. I'm a solutions architect for CPS as well. I'm also an Office development MVP and member of the Microsoft 365 patterns and practices team.
And I've noticed, I don't know if these great new backgrounds that Thomas Birch made for us, just another shout out for him there because I did the last one right at the end of the show. But the background seemed to be disappearing, like your hat is really vanishing a lot. So I don't know if Teams has changed, Al, or if it's that background.
I don't know whether it's the colour of the hat. Maybe I just need,
It's all right. It goes from like a Santa hat to just like a white beanie. So it's like you're wearing two hats.
It's like a headband.
There you go. That
works.
works.
Is that better? Yeah.
What you need is to hang a microphone. So for those who can't see, Al's now hung his Santa hat over his face and has the dongly bit there. Now, if we could put a microphone in there, sorted.
God, this is a family-friendly show.
Yeah, so you're painting a picture there, aren't you?
They always said I've not only got a face for radio, but a voice for radio as well. That doesn't work either. Anyway, it's late on a Monday. It's been a long day and a long weekend. We're going to kick off, obviously, with the news in part one. And then in part two, we're going to be talking about privacy. So there's lots of good conversations been going around recently that have kicked this off. But we'll cover those with a bit of news that have come up from that in part two. But in part one, let's kick off with the news. And Al, you spotted some interesting roadmap stuff coming about OneDrive.
I did, yeah. Being able to create a shared library in OneDrive. It's for me, a lot of clients wonder, OneDrive, it's a bit of a security risk unless you've got the right security and compliance in place. But sharing content from OneDrive means that people inevitably keep more and more content in OneDrive, and I feel like I'm forever having a go at people going, why are you it's great that they're sharing links, but why are you sharing a link from OneDrive when we've got a team where we put all of our collaborative content? And my first thought on this was, oh great, another place where people are going to store content, and it's going to be in their private, and it's not going to be in a collaborative space with maybe all of the security and compliance guidance, the retention and all of that good stuff. So my immediate thought was, oh no, that's going to just complicate the matter. And so, yeah, that was my thought. A new addition in terms of capabilities, but not necessarily a great one. But I think, Gary, you had a slightly different perspective on it, didn't you?
Yeah, so I think most people who have been working with SharePoint for quite a while have your kind of approach to that, Al. I think we're very much a case of, put documents in a central area for your team. Don't just hold on to it and then share it out to people because, the burden of maintaining all the permissions and things. But recently I've been working on a large project with a customer moving from Google Suite to Microsoft 365. And one of the big changes for people using Google, they're moving to 365, is that in Google, documents are based around your Google Drive, your personal storage, and then there's this sharing that happens, and that is natural within the Google kind of platform.
Sprawl.
Yeah, but it's because Google doesn't necessarily have this concept of teams and centralized areas, which Microsoft have had for years. That has been SharePoint's core focus. So by seeing customers move from Google to, say, OneDrive, it's immediate confusion of, well, my Google Drive has gone to OneDrive, but where have my shared libraries gone? Mm-hmm. Well, actually, they're this thing called Sharepoint now. And then instantly you're thinking, okay, what's SharePoint? And that's very easy for us to say. We live in this bubble, but if you've not used it for a long time, or you're not aware of it, it's another adoption hurdle, right? So I can see where this has come from. I might not necessarily agree with it, in the same ways that you're talking, Al, but I can understand how it's come about, to just ease the customers moving into the platform who may have not been using it in the past.
I think the issue is it's creating another place where you can go and create a new SharePoint site. And if you're trying to put in place governance and you're trying to put in place a provisioning engine, so you're making sure that people aren't duplicating a lot of content, or maybe putting templates and ensuring permission around that, there's another place where you've got to go and stop people doing things from. So there was quite a lot of noise. And I think, Al, you were saying there was some good conversation that Jeff Teeper was trying to answer a lot of things on there. And I think, again, I can see why for this, but it's going to cause more pain, definitely.
But I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that I can see the rationale when, not having thought of it as a potential benefit in a compete situation with Google.
Yeah,
it makes sense in that scenario. In other scenarios, then you'd kind of hope that you can turn it off and go, yeah, well, we don't actually want that added third location. So I think that's potentially one of the things that we'll have to investigate.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the stopping people from creating groups in Outlook in a similar way, isn't it? It's a very similar to that. So I think it's one of those things that, whether you agree or disagree, maybe it's situational whether it's going to be beneficial or not, but we need to have that option to say whether we can use it or not, and turn it on and off where appropriate.
And I do find it interesting because, Al, you were talking about OneDrive being your documents, but actually, if you go to the OneDrive site now, the your documents part is such a small bit of it that actually so much more is it's all your different drives and all your different SharePoint type bits on there. That notion is almost a behind the scenes admin view for people who just want to go and work with files. OneDrive is the place to go, and I think they're kind of increasing that notion there. That's the positive side of it.
And I think you're absolutely right, especially when you look at the mobile apps. SharePoint is news and communications, and OneDrive is files. And I think it helps to have that separation. I guess it's just because you might have shared content and then somebody leaves, and then OneDrive gets archived after a number of days. If that content isn't in the right location, it's the same conversation we've been having for, the last 15 years with SharePoint. And I guess coming from a SharePoint history of 15 years of trying to get people to put stuff in SharePoint sites, it's just one of those things you kind of look at and go, oh, it's just going to create so much chaos. But there is they've done it for a good reason. A specific but it does open up all sorts of questions and potentially make that security and compliance conversation even harder than it already is.
Yeah, I think it's you mentioned about the mobile app, and this has just reminded me of how I'm using OneDrive and SharePoint for my own personal documents. So I've just moved house, got lots of documents, got lots of paperwork.
Just quickly, Gary, do you want to confess this in public?
Yes, I absolutely do. But it uses this concept that we're talking about. I'll receive a letter and I just want to scan it and get it away. So I can digitize it using OneDrive, but because I've got a site specifically set up for that to put those documents and it's kind of categorized, I can do that all through OneDrive. I can say, I want to place this in my shared library. It just so happens that it's a SharePoint site. Now, to people who don't know it's SharePoint, do they really care? They just know it's this shared area. So I can see the benefit of it. I mean, it's very easy to use. And I think before with OneDrive, like you're saying, Al, about there was this split that SharePoint wasn't really included in the app, but now it really is, and it's becoming a lot. They're becoming a lot closer. But you're right. The SharePoint app there is for your news, for getting to people.
And it's probably a good reminder for us as consultants that when we say don't store stuff in OneDrive, what we mean is don't store it in files, that the files section of OneDrive. But maybe we need to be promoting OneDrive as an area to go to for documents. But just thinking about you're putting it in a sharing area, which this would support.
And inevitably, we will carry on having this conversation for many years to come.
But moving on now, in the interest of anyone still listening, the link, the regular pit stop blog post that Mark Cashman pulls together. There is a podcast. Obviously, listen to us. Don't always need to. If you've kind of listened to all the Grey Hat Beards, maybe give that a listen. The Intrazone podcast isn't bad, I suppose. I've been very tongue-in-cheek. It's a great podcast on there, but there's some other ones on here. The SharePoint site performance page. So for those of you creating pages, and maybe you've got a lot on there, especially putting some web parts, a great way to look at the page health. I know, Gary, I think you've talked before, certainly tweeted about using the Google way of analyzing page. What's it like, Lighthouse, to look at the performance of your animated videos and GIFs on your page?
Yeah, I mean, that's more of a generic kind of web analytics, so it's checking for accessibility as well. But obviously, it's giving you pointers of things that you can change. It'd be interesting to see what, like the use case for this, because previously with performance, it's been very much development driven. Like the developer draft dashboard. I think
on this, I mean, it talks on there, and I've seen before, it's like the size of your images. So it talks about, should you have things on CDNs? Maybe if you have too many web parts on there, then you're loading up your page and it's front loading two things, that kind of thing. So I think that there's a developer idea to it, but I think it's more power users than development focused. So it's throwing a whole load of stuff on your page and then being surprised that it takes ages to load.
I think
it's good to look at.
I was going to say, I think it is more of an after the fact rather than a sort of upfront. Oh, let's go through these checks as we're publishing it. Let's make sure that every page we create is accessible and is performant.
Sorry, I just had to laugh at one thing on there that says web parts using iframes detected. Well, I'd like to find a page that doesn't.
If you follow all the best practices, this is going to warn you not to do that. So excellent. That has made me chuckle. So for those who can't see on the page, improvement opportunities, it flags web parts using iframes. And for those who've had the joys of SharePoint framework, it will be using iframes all over the place, whether you like it or not, really. So that's intriguing. Maybe saying
iframes
custom div.
Thought iframes were first-party apps now in SharePoint.
Yeah,
if you're putting Power BI or Canvas apps in there, or presenting a doc, actually pretty much any web part surely is now an iframe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's intriguing one. We'll have to see how that develops. I think the other one that came out was the MyFeed web part that's looking very nice. So getting all your content into one place for that. The other one related to feeds, and I think it is the next one down a little bit further, is that Microsoft Search. There's going to be a lot of updates. So the new Microsoft Graph connectors for Microsoft Search are now general availability. So you can connect in to when you've got your search, and I've got a blog post around creating a custom one, but you can connect to things like MediaWiki or your own enterprise website. Definitely one included. I was talking with the Global Developer Bootcamp and sort of showing some of these examples that you can do these wizard-based ones for connecting to websites, or you can develop your own as well. And notice on that, interesting, Salesforce has now popped up. I am going to have to update my slides for next week now. There was only 7. That's a brand new one that's appeared recently. So there's a lot coming with search, and the next bit of news was also that the Microsoft Search APIs, so that you can use a Microsoft Graph to go and query those, they're in V1 of the content. So you can start to build your first-party apps and your other code to be able to go and use the power of Microsoft Search, not just SharePoint Search. You can get the broader aspect of that, and that includes those ability to search those third-party connectors. All that can come through the API. And I know, Gary, you helped me out on a project that we were using that in a single page application. So that's now V1, which is good to know.
Yeah, I'm starting to like that we're getting a lot of announcements almost together now, because we had the news about the connectors going GA, followed quickly by the graph APIs going GA as well. And I think that I'm hoping that they planned it that way, because it would be nice, because sometimes you get one component and then you've got to wait ages for the next component to really make use of it. But no, it's good. I'm looking forward to using this.
I'm pretty sure they are, and the reason is because the next news connected with this is Mary Jo Foley, Yeah, it's a great journalist that works around the Microsoft space, did a big article about Microsoft Search. And obviously Microsoft bought fast, and we've sort of gradually been seeing more and more of those things that you could do 10 years ago that you can finally do again,
So
which
you've
is
just
very
mentioned
nice.
fast, which is just brings back painful memories. But you could do so much of this stuff, you know, searching catalogs and SQL and all of that super fast. And it's amazing to think that it's 10 years later and it's just about there.
Yeah, but I think there's a whole load of things, and I have to admit I missed this from Ignite, but Mary Jo was talking about some of the items there, including standalone search private preview. So if you wanted Microsoft Search without the rest of Microsoft 365, you'll soon be able to get that as well. So if you wanted to pull your custom content and get all the magic, I know there's Azure Cognitive Search, which is similar but not quite as easy to use. This brings in the ease of use, the ease of management of that without having to pay for the rest of Microsoft 365 as well. So that was quite interesting to make note of. And they've also, I know they said at Ignite that all the Cortex elements, we've had SharePoint Syntax has come out. They've said the rest of those will come out by the end of the year. I'm hoping any day now we will start to see this. So I think, Gary, these are things leading up to that, basically.
Yeah, I know what you're going to be doing over the Christmas holidays then.
Searching, yeah. Lego.
Searching for releases.
Yeah,
I think it's been a long time coming. Search maturing in Office 365 so that you've got the same capabilities that you had. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to it all coming together and actually, hopefully, all gelling in a way that makes it easy to use, easy to configure. Hopefully, we'll actually be able to see a timeline of, you know, when we change something, how long do we have to wait for search to actually index? That would be the ideal thing, to know when a full crawl is actually taking place.
Oh, we'll never know. They'll never tell us
about 3 hours based on this afternoon, but that's a different story. Yeah, that would be very, very nice. That's a particularly sore subject at the moment. The other bit of news, I think it was Peter Vinstra that I first saw this mentioned about, and big fan of P&P PowerShell. Huge amount you can do to go and interact with your SharePoint environment, and mostly SharePoint, a few other bits and pieces and groups and things in there. And many people, when the Azure functions came out and they had a preview of being able to run PowerShell in an Azure function, so you could run an automated bit of code. I certainly worked on something where we had a provisioning engine as part of that. So we had a new project would be spun up. It would create a site, create various assets, and it was done with the PowerShell rather than using CSOM and others, because I knew most people there were more comfortable with that. And we put up an Azure functions and preview. And then when the PowerShell went to, in Azure functions came out of went to general availability, I think it was V2 or V3, they went down the P&P core route, which is the version 6 and version 7. But that meant that at the time, the P&P PowerShell that was available couldn't be run on that. Now, Erwin and others like Paul Bullock, I think he's been doing some good work on this, have been really getting that P&P PowerShell core version up and getting close to parity. And they have made some changes. So there's definitely changes you need to make to any scripts. But if you were using that old PowerShell in the Azure Functions V1, apparently it is starting to stop working. So you certainly can't create any new ones in that. And I'm seeing a few people say that they can't actually, you can't switch over to that, and things starting to fail that were there. Certainly, if someone accidentally deletes that function, you can't recreate it and things on there. So that was a little bit worrying, some of the news that was coming through from that, and not particularly consistent. And probably the reminder is that if Microsoft says something's in preview and it hasn't gone to general availability, it means it's in preview and it hasn't gone to general availability. And if you put your production code on there, they could just go, yeah, we're changing it, and it goes. I think it's a really good reminder for when you're speaking with people and going for that new, really great, shiny stuff. Might be worth waiting a little bit occasionally.
Yeah, I think with the preview stuff, there could be a thought process of, well, it's only available in some regions, which in some cases, that's what preview means. It's not quite rolled out yet. General availability is, it's in most of the major data centers. It might not be in a few, but it's got the general coverage. I think that's what people may look at, but actually, like you're saying, it's no, this could change at any moment. It might not go forwards. Another possibility might come along that might be better than what they're working on currently. So, there's always that in the back of your mind, if you are using something in preview, that things definitely can change, and that's even more so now than it has been, because of being in the cloud and the different challenges that Microsoft have to react to as well. If there's not much value coming from it, they can just drop it.
Well, so how many things get to preview and don't go any further? I mean, I think it's one of the things, everything gets developed, everything keeps changing. Preview can change for many reasons. It may not deliver the value that it started off expecting, or other things may come along that actually change the way it needs to work. If you think about the search stuff, everything's changing all at once. You would hate it if one thing were a preview and then it had to change. So don't use it in production. Simple rule.
Yeah. Gmail, that's another great example. That was preview. Was it 7-8 years? Something ridiculous. Didn't want to use that. I think it's interesting with the PowerShell. I think they've got a sensible route, because they've waited to put it into their functions until it could be deployed to all the different underlying platforms. So you can run it on Linux or on Windows functions. So by going for the core version, they've got that cross-platform. You can run it locally, sits nice in your containers, etc. All the good things that you get with that. It's just unfortunate that PnP PowerShell has obviously had to wait for the CSOM endpoints to be .NET standardized, so that they've been waiting for a lot of things there, and that's probably the biggest pain that's come from it, really. But I think it's good story coming there.
It's also symptomatic of something being really successful. The PnP PowerShell, a lot of people went for it because actually they could do it an awful lot faster than if they were actually using the other tools that were available. So it's also,
and no one likes CLIs either.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we might know one person who likes a CLI.
I could see going here going.
You're perfectly right, though. It's whatever brings value, right? And people certainly see value in PnP PowerShell. It's a fantastic tool, and it is, it has filled a huge gap in what Microsoft have been releasing with the standard Sharepoint management shell, to then have PnP PowerShell pretty much being able to automate everything.
I always forget that standard one's there, to be honest.
Exactly.
It kind of pops up in the docs, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about
does it still only have like 27 commandlets?
It's you get the odd one that'll come out. There'll be a new feature. I think there'll be like the site swap will get added in, right. But then it'll get added into PnP PowerShell at some point. But it's still there. It gives great value. It's we're not saying that PnP PowerShell is the issue here. It's using the functions. If you're using Azure automation, you're still fine, right? That's the a technology which is staying around. So it's I think everyone was jumping on the Azure functions at the time, because everyone was saying we need to do something. Azure function. Oh, I don't want to write C#.
They worked very nicely. They were great.
Yep.
Just preview. A little bit of news, just a quiet one, this one, and possibly not directly in our usual area, but Salesforce is reportedly in talks to acquire Slack. And I don't think it would have been well, maybe not the other way around, but I'd say they were pretty much getting near to being on a par at some point. Slack was growing hugely, and then COVID seemed to have happened, and they seem to have slowed down an awful lot. I
don't know whether
I was a little surprised here.
Yeah, I don't know whether they've slowed down a lot or whether they've just been overtaken a lot. Other products have sped up, and I think it's really shown some of the shortcomings of Slack, in particular the video conferencing.
Yeah,
that's the big thing. But I think there's still a lot of Slack users out there.
Absolutely, I don't think it's going to disappear, but
I think you hit the nail on the head there, the video conferencing element of it. Whereas previously, before COVID, it wasn't as important, you would suggest. And, I look at Slack and it's still very much, chat channels and things. And I think you possibly have the call in there, but that's kind of what it is. Whereas, people are now looking for this kind of bit more joined up approach, certainly with Teams and how it's bringing people together, and Teams kind of, there's that missing element of that one kind of platform.
But it's funny you say that. To me, if I would have thought that Slack would have joined Slack and Zoom feel like they go together, and I know they work together as a platform very well. You feel they could join as, I think that's where Al, I absolutely agree. Zoom has jumped ahead of them, but if they joined together, they would be a very powerful third wheel on there. Salesforce, it feels a bit different. There's Salesforce. I can't remember the messaging tools name on there. Chatter. They've got the technology. Chatter. Thank you. Yeah.
But I think they made a lot with Chatter. A lot of people were using that. Probably a lot of people still are. And I think there's a maturity that Salesforce lack in that space that Slack could deliver. But as you say, if they brought Zoom in, I think it's interesting though, because if you look at the two of them coming together, there'd be a lot of commonality between what you see with Teams if you don't have the UC part in it. If you put video in there, then you get a bit more of that, but they still wouldn't have the telephony side of it. And I think it's a really interesting story where, if you think sort of 2 years ago, Microsoft really pushing the E5 and the telephony, and everyone's kind of going, that's really quite a hard pitch, because that's selling hardware. That's waiting for capex investments to expire and then actually going for more money. Whereas now it kind of seems like, well, that's a really good idea because so many organizations are turning to it. But I think it's Slack and Salesforce. For me, that makes a lot of sense. I can see why they're doing it. But as you say, if they put Zoom in the picture, Microsoft would have some real competition there.
Yeah.
Although I don't think they store documents particularly well, so SharePoint's still got a place.
You mean the shared libraries, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, my mistake. Shared libraries, OneDrive. Yeah.
It was interesting that hearing this news about Slack and Salesforce, and you're thinking, remember when there was that open letter to Microsoft about 4 years ago? Has that aged well? Wonder if it has. Wonder if it hasn't.
You need to wonder.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I think we talked on the show about Teams' numbers, and I've forgotten how much was it, 115 million, up from about 15 million. And then I heard Zoom's, and I think there's something like 300 million or something absolutely bonkers like that. They're
consumer, aren't they?
True.
Yeah.
So's Teams. They've got the personal edition.
Sorry. I don't think there's much competition there, to be fair, for Zoom.
Yeah, based on the abuse I get from friends every time I try and suggest a Teams call instead of Zoom, no.
Yeah, but what you don't hear much about though is Skype. You've not heard anything about Skype over the pandemic. It's all been Zoom. Nobody's gone, I'm going to Skype somebody. Whereas that's been around 20 years and, that started the whole thing off. So it's interesting.
Around 20 years?
Bloody I think it was 2003 or something like that. So
right, let's move on to the next subject. This all started today after my wife was a pharmacist and was doing a course on dementia, and my son saw this picture of this old man pointing at a poster and said, "Daddy, is that you?" I was like, "No, he's 70. Thanks for that." So age is not a good subject at the moment. Moving on very quickly.
So the joys of licensing, was that?
The joys of licensing. Our good friend, the tattooed CRM guy, Chris Huntingford, put out what I think he probably thought was a nice little tweet, wouldn't, kind of a bit of interest and things like that. And I think it's exploded, it's fair to say. So really, he's trying to, there's so many, and we had Chris come onto the show to talk about licensing with the Power Platform. It is such a big topic. So many people want to know about it. People find it complex, probably. I don't want to say it because Chris will come hunting me down, but there are times where it's complex. There are things to consider. but it's not as bad as you think. And Chris has done a beautiful flow diagram of, really simplifying what it is you need. And I think he's looking to get some help and support in how can we make this more available, make it either prettier or in places that you can follow, and maybe add more detail to it. But if you want to get a simple view of what the information is on licensing the Power Platform, listen to our show with Chris, which was, I think, show 18. If you want it in picture form, have a look at this great tweet. And it's got a simple one of, I'm excited about using Power Apps. Do you have an M365 license? If yes, do you want to connect Dynamic, for example? If no, do you want to leverage premium connectors? It's trying to break down into the simple questions that you need when it comes to licensing and get you to a point roughly where you get an answer. It's not going to be the complete answer. There's always going to be some levels of complexity, but this will give you a high level of pushing you towards the right place. And I think it's a lovely summary.
It's a great starting point, and this has always been a challenging area. I mean, there will always be levels of depth to drill into, but we all need a good simple place to start, and this is a really good place to start. As always, you'd always still need to read the whole of the licensing guide, which is 35 pages of absolute heaven, but in 35 seconds you can probably get pretty close to the final answer. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm hoping what someone can help do with this is a bit like what Matt Wade did with the Office 365 what's the word I'm looking for, periodic table of Office 365, where great nice simple picture, and then it's gradually evolved where you can click on it and add some more detail to it as well. Be interesting to see how far that can go with this, but I think it's a great idea.
I think it's always the case with these, isn't it? You tell 1,000 words with a nice little picture. It will hopefully make life a lot easier for us all.
I think the one thing that's good is that it depends on which level you're coming at, right? You've got some organizations that have got Dynamics already there. You've got some that haven't. It's knowing where those lines are of going, actually we're building apps here on SharePoint or whatever, and that's fine, but we want to start to ramp up that actually, you're starting to get to a point where you're not just looking at one app, you're looking at more of a strategy to go, well, actually, do we need to go up a level as an organization to get the most out of this platform? That might be starting to look at a bit more Dynamics, because you get a bit more of the Power Platform in there. So I think that's quite good as well, that he's got those levels in there with the little icons. It's easy to see where is Dynamics, where is Power Platform, where is Office 365. Sorry, Microsoft 365.
And I think it's great. It was interesting. I listened to a few podcasts recently. The Up podcast, the one they had after Ignite, and they were talking about some bloke who talked something interesting. Weldeck master something or other. Well, yeah, Weldeck. Everyone knows Weldeck. He's famous. He's in the MVP space. But that crossover between the Dynamics world and the SharePoint world wasn't there. And I was listening to PMP Weekly, and Serge Luca was talking about Dataverse and this thing called the CDS, and Vesa actually come in and said, for those who maybe don't know what the CDS was, and just in the SharePoint word, and it's like, really? Surely people know what the CDS was. But I think there are people who've gone and done a lot of Power Automate, a lot of Power Apps, just in SharePoint or just looking at the Dynamics world. Explore the other world, because there's so many different elements to it that are worth looking at. It's interesting that people who haven't quite realized what's out there, and it's definitely worth exploring both sides.
Explore the Dataverse. Is that going to be a tagline? It should be.
Explore the Dataverse. There we go. Rest in peace.
Yeah, don't get lost in the Dataverse.
That would be, you'd end up in Teams.
I should say I was very pleased to get messages from Gary and Al that they've now watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and know all about my random witterings about Spider-Ham. So it wasn't completely made up.
Yeah, and after watching it, I was like, why have I not watched this sooner? This is brilliant.
Absolutely. It's a great film.
Absolutely brilliant film. Gary, there was some news coming out about PMP PowerShell. No, sorry. The other one. What was it called?
The other one, CLI for Microsoft 365. Yes, we've just, so it's another month. End of the month, we've just released the new version. So 3.3 has just been released. So lots of updates in there. I guess one of the notable kind of mentions is in this release, we've completed all of the basic commands for to-do. So if you want to automate creation of to-dos, you've got big lists you want to work on, get them all in, create lists and things, all those commands are there. There's still some more that we can build, but the basics are there. So if you are using to-do and you're interested in that, then take a look, see if there's anything else that we can add in there, and we'll try and make that even easier and better. Or if there's a scenario that, for bulk creation, we can look at that and see if we can simplify things. But yeah, we've got a lot of things kind of going on. I'm working quite a lot on trying to simplify the development side. So I've recently been doing some work.
When you say development side, I think developing for the CLI or with the CLI.
So on the development side, to make it easier, so for contributing, so been working on how you can kind of create a development environment with everything preloaded with a click of a button, so that you can get up and running and just create the commands. You don't have to worry about what version of Node do I need, how do I get things set up, run the tests. So I actually did a demo of that at the PMP community call this week. So using Visual Studio remote development containers, which is more interesting than it sounds. But yeah, working on that, and also getting the CLI into Docker as well. So you can just download the CLI in one command with Docker, and everything's pre-installed for you. So again, you don't even have to install different versions of Node, just to kind of make it a bit of an easier way to consume the CLI. Nice.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing Weldeck talking about the Mark shell and which was all about getting commands. So you got your markdown with all your documentation with the commands, and having that come out in the command line interface, so you're not having two different instances of it, which and that sounded really impressive. I like to
and what's really good about this is this is open source working together. So Stefan Bauer, it created Mark shell, and he had a use case. We saw that and went, actually, that'd be brilliant for us. We don't have to do documentation in our commands and in the docs. We can just bring the docs in and render them in the console with colors and everything, all just from the markdown. And yeah, that's been brilliant. It's really sped things up. So now if we need to do an update, we don't need to update things in two places, which is always good. But yeah, I think that was a really good example.
Automation 101, really, isn't
it? Exactly, yeah. I think it's a good example of someone else having an idea and running with it, really, and then it ending up in the CLI. And yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant.
And Al, you've been busy with your blog. I love this post.
One of the biggest blogs I've done. It was supposed to be a nice, simple explanation or exploration. It started off as an explanation of the settings to configure sharing within Office 365. But
Microsoft 365.
Well, it was really around the documents to start with, but it ended up going into Teams and Azure and pretty much 9 different locations where there are different settings to actually configure the sharing, which it was big, but yeah, I think it was well needed though, because there isn't anything else that actually explains it all. So I still have it on my list to get it into the community docs so that it's there as well.
That's a really good idea. No, I have to say, when I saw this, I was like, I had 9. This is one of those joke ones where there's 3 and then they're described slightly differently, and went into it and went, wow, there really is 9. I didn't know about that one or that one. Oh yeah. I hadn't thought about that. No, really enjoyed this post.
Yeah, and there's a spreadsheet in there as well that has all the settings together, so that if you do actually want to configure it, you can actually set up the configuration and then know exactly which portals you need to go to actually confirm that they're all set in the right way.
Really nice. And while we're there, you and I are going to be busy next Thursday.
We are indeed, yeah. So lightning sessions on the theme of Christmas. So yeah, London Power Platform User Group. So we've got, I think, 5 sessions set up at the moment. So Peter Veenstra, who you spoke about earlier, so one of his sons is doing a demo for us from the Power Apps for Kids sessions they've been doing. I'm doing one on how not to double book meetings on Christmas Day. So we all know we're going to have lots more Zoom and Teams meetings, don't we? Probably not Teams, hopefully just Zoom meetings. So how to avoid double booking them on Christmas Day. We have the Ho 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 bot from Arta Zelinsky. I'm waiting to see what that is. I'm intrigued. All I know is that it's called Ho 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 bot. Laura GB doing Christmas Carol text analysis. Which,
by that one, yeah.
If you know
Must
Laura,
be some Power BI.
Absolutely, there will be some Power BI in it, and it will no doubt be very entertaining.
So is Laura going to be singing? That's the question.
I don't know. We could always ask her to sing. Yeah, and then finally, yeah, and then finally we've got you doing the Christmas Power Platform User Group times.
Yes. I'll give away what it is. I was thinking, so I've got my paper calendar on the wall has now been replaced by an iPad running a Power App that shows our family calendar. So you can see it very easily there. And I was thinking, what other traditional things that around Christmas that are paper could you replace with a nice Power App? And for me, Christmas starts when the Radio Times comes out and you go through it and you circle all the bits of TV you want and you start your arguments because someone wants Doctor Who at the same time as Call the Midwife or whatever it is that overlaps. So we're going to have a Power App so that if someone throws a strop, you can smash a whole iPad, not just a bit of paper.
Fantastic. Yeah. I was going to say that's an age thing, isn't it? The Radio Times. I'm sure there might be some listeners who are from the UK and have no idea what the Radio Times is.
That is there. For those who don't know, it's a nice magazine that comes and has all the Christmas TV in there, and you flick through because it's far too complicated to use an electronic guide, and you can have your pipe and slippers and still sit there and read the Radio Times. But
and if for those keen-eared listeners, it's a very British thing because obviously it's got the TV listings, not the radio listings. Even though it's called the Radio Times.
Yeah.
I think, no, it does still have the radio listings.
Have the radio listings as well.
Yep, it does have the radio as well.
That is how old it is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check what's on Radio 1 at any point, which is perfect.
Absolutely. And we've all got a busy day on Friday as well, don't we?
We do, yes. And I thought I had this open, but I don't. But yes, it is Collab Days Munich and Vienna, the winter across the Alps. So they've combined I think it was SharePoint Saturday Munich, wasn't it? SharePoint Saturday Vienna. So now obviously a lot of these are falling under the Collab Days banner. And I think, Al, you're speaking there?
Yes, I am. I'm doing a security and compliance concepts explained. So I'm using all sorts of metaphors, analogies, and no modern dance whatsoever to try and explain security and compliance for the layperson. So yeah, give some nice examples in that.
And then we also have, I was getting a bit nervous, I couldn't find it for a second there, the Grey Hat Beard panel on the etiquette of Microsoft 365. So for those who are lucky enough to have heard us at Commsverse, we will be back. We have Louise Fries is joining us again. We have Carolina Ketukari who's joining us, and also Vesa Noppanen. Now Vesa has been very kind because he actually has a whiskey tasting that evening, and he's agreed to delay it slightly to come and join the panel. But that does suggest that maybe we should start some whiskey drinking during the panel. So there may even be 6 of us drunk raving about the etiquette of Microsoft 365. Can't promise that, but there is the good chance.
That would be amusing because I'm on straight after that.
There's preparation for you.
Yeah, there's preparation. Yeah. The best way to talk about security and compliance is after a whiskey tasting.
That sounds ideal. And I've also got the I've got to get the right name for this, Microsoft 365 Saturday in Bangalore. I'll be speaking to the good people of India there on December the 12th about Microsoft Search. So sharing the what, the why, and the how. So really looking forward to that one. I have to admit, Bangalore I haven't been to. Would like to go and visit one day and see. I've heard some great things about it, so would like to go and see there. Gary, you're talking at the Microsoft 365 UK user group. That's our good friend Chirag's been doing a really great job hosting that.
Yeah, talking about keyless authentication, so Azure managed identity. So making things really easy to connect to different Microsoft 365 services or Azure resources with absolutely no keys and secrets and certificates to handle. Let Azure do all the hard work.
So is it fair to say that's one for the developers?
No, if you're an IT pro as well. If you're using Logic Apps and using no code, use it with Logic Apps. In fact, I use it with Logic Apps all the time. It's very easy to get something set up and running. If you just want to build something out, do some proof of concepts, you can use this managed identity very quickly to just get some HTTP actions together, work out what the calls are, sit back and go, okay, what bits might I want to change to leverage other resources? But you've worked out the path very quickly. Definitely
anything that makes authentication easier is better in my books, I have to say.
Exactly.
That's half. It's great talk.
Yeah, that's half the battle, right? You just want things to work, and this just helps it along. You don't want to get into authentication and be thinking about all the different flows that you can go through. If you're doing something in the background, something automated, then easy way to do app only calls as well. That it makes things much easier and much more secure as well, because you don't have any secrets to worry about.
Before that, I've got Patrick, how am I going to say, Guimene. I hope I got that wrong. Sorry, Patrick, if not. Talking about SharePoint Spaces, which is very interesting to see where that's got to. A few early things for next year to sign up for: the Modern Workplace Conference Paris. I'll be speaking about Microsoft Search there, and all of us again will be at the Scottish Summit. In fact, Al, we can just about see you and Laura at the front there enjoying things last year. But it's going to be a huge event. I'm really excited to be getting involved in this. I kind of went to offer to help out, and they are absolutely inundated with helpers, which isn't often. So really is a community-driven event. Should be fantastic.
I think one of the things which I saw was there's over 100 new speakers. I think I read.
Yeah,
and
they're getting mentors to help them, which is brilliant. Really good idea.
I mean, when you see that some of the spreadsheets, is it that the Mark and Ian have been posting?
Yes.
Yeah.
You just kind of think, wow, just to narrow down to however many hundreds of sessions they actually have. Yeah, massive event.
Absolutely. Yeah. So no, it should be a very good event. Looking forward to that one. But I think it's time for us to stop talking about the news and events and start getting more private. So we'll wind up part 1 and get on to part 2. Thanks very much.
Started as we finished.
Absolutely. We're all circular. See you along in part 2.